go. All right. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you are doing well. Let me redo that. Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, internet's busiest music nerd. Hope you are doing well. And here, live on Twitch, but replayable on YouTube, thank you for watching, is an exclusive interview with none other than singer, songwriter, multi-instrumentalist, and showman, in my opinion, Mr. Kirin J. Callinan. How are you doing, man?
I'm doing, Anthony. Thank you for having me.
Thank you for coming through. All right, you've got a new single out. I imagine a new album on the way too?
Yes, I do have a new album on the way. However, the single that I've put out is not on said album.
Okay. So you're working on some new music. You've just put out some new stuff. The title of the track is "You're Gonna Miss Me When I'm Gone." The meaning in the title here, is it as obvious as it seems on the surface, with just, again, that very bold, plain message being stated in the title while also looping into the article of clothing and the incident that's related to on the cover? What exactly are you trying to get across with this new non-album single?
I hope that it's as obvious as it seems. The intent with that song, and indeed the record that song is from, there is an album there, was to be direct, to sort of take away my inclination or more obtuse leanings, and subtract some of the personality and flamboyance, and just try to write emotionally direct songs for the first time. It was a sort of interesting challenge, as well as had a conceptual grounding. But it was at the time of writing. I wrote that song early 2018. It was about it was sort of targeted at my ex-girlfriend, who we were having issues with, and I loved madly. It was also targeted at the Australian music industry that I sort of felt betrayed by, in a way. But it didn't come out at the time, and the reason for its release now is, aside from me churning through my vault of unreleased material and pulling these things out that I sort of hadn't listened to for 6 months or more, and going, that's got something. It also felt more poignant and more relevant, given the events of the past year. I think it sort of is something we all can relate to. I'm missing how the world was. I'm missing my old life. I'm missing being able to travel and see my friends and go dancing and all the rest of it. But in answer to your question, that was sort of with the artwork of the kilt, which you can actually see behind me over here.
Okay.
The frames kilt back there was, well, I guess it was a sort of backhanded, to sort of swipe at feeling underappreciated by the Australian music industry specifically.
I know the arias, the flashing incident, all of that, that really kind of threw you into the midst of a whirlwind that went on for quite a while, and I imagine came with plenty of headaches. Do you at all personally feel like there is a risk run in dredging this up, in at least a subtle way with this new track and the cover art and so on and so forth? I mean, right now, do you feel like you're at a point in your life and in your kind of artistic trajectory where you're trying to just get past it and like ignore it as if it never happened, or, it's sort of a part of the narrative now and it's never going away?
That's it. I think the only way to confront anything is to, ultimately I flashed some photographers. How that was perceived at the time and how it's perceived now is sort of outside of my control. But I'm going to own it as best I can. The way I look at the incident was that it's just a chapter in a pretty funny chapter, frankly, in my story. I'm not going to overstate it, but yeah, it's or downplay it for that matter. But it really is just a chapter in the story, and I want to own it. The conceptual grounding of the album Artifacts is that I'm sort of digging up these archaeological pieces, these and blowing the dust off these classic songs, and so pairing them with significant incidences and physical artifacts like the kilt from my life was sort of an interesting idea. So no, I'm not afraid of digging it up. I'm not really trying to milk it either, but and I didn't at the time, and I certainly haven't.
Hmm.
But rather than being, definitely emotionally affected me, and made me second guess myself for a long time. Hence why I haven't put out a record of originals since Bravado. But I've certainly been writing, and like I said, having gone through all my vast back catalogue of unreleased works, there's some really great stuff there. So I'm looking forward to putting it all out and having the events from the past few years, be a part of the narrative.
So all of this work that you're talking about, this is going into the new project that you are working on or piecing together?
So I have a new album that I'm working on. I'm not sure what that's called. It's sort of, the process is mostly based around spontaneity and letting it happen, both musically, lyrically, not second guessing it, just sort of first thought, worst thought, and committing to that. That's a whole other thing. The album Artifact that You're Gonna Miss Me When I'm Gone is a total different beast. It was a sort of shelved album that I made in 2018, never finished, but I'm sort of revisiting it now, and sort of self-prophesizing in a way, because it was called Artifact, and in itself it's been lost, and I'm digging it up piece by piece.
And when you were talking about the creative process of this song, I'm kind of detouring into another thing that you mentioned earlier. You were talking about approaching the writing process with less flamboyance or extravagance or something. Would you say that is kind of just the approach you were taking on that single song, the project it was a part of, or is that sort of,
That was
been something that's in the forefront of your mind with a lot of your writing as of late?
No, not of late. I got bored of it. I got bored of suppressing my eccentricities.
Yeah, I imagine that's kind of an essential part of the Kirin recipe.
I think it's interesting in retrospect, and that's why it's going to come out. But it's why it also got shelved. Is I lost interest. It didn't excite me as much, and me sort of playing the straight guy, which I'd never done before, has got something. So it will come out. But no, the record I'm working on now is the complete opposite. It's leading into whatever I do first on the microphone, whatever, we got the band together and we just recorded 6 hours of jamming. And from that, we've got about 25 pieces that I then sort of pull out and see if we can't condense into a concise song and jump on the microphone and see what happens, as opposed to the meticulous approach to Artifact that, frankly, I lost interest in.
And this flamboyance and bravado that you're known for in all of your music, frankly, what kind of shape do you see it taking on this new project? Because I mean, it's always taken a different shape. It's always kind of being embodied in a different way on each record. And what kind of direction is it going in now, would you say?
Look, I can speak musically speaking. It's been informed by this album that I co-wrote late last year and early this year by an artist called Genesis Owusu, where we basically put together a band, and over the course of just a few days, maybe 5 days total, just improvised. Just got a great band together. It was touch sensitive on bass. Julian Sudek on drums, old bandmate of mine from Mercy Arms days. Andrew Clipple, an old head in Sydney that has been involved in all sorts of things, from Human Nature, which is sort of Australia's Backstreet Boys. He was heavily involved in that. He's been involved in all sorts of things over the years. Him on keys, and myself on guitar. And we improvised, and they took that away. And Kofi Genesis then sort of did his Prince meets Kendrick Lamar, I guess, sort of. And it's totally his own as well. He did his thing over it and sort of bottled his personality on top of these really flamboyant, colourful, improvised jams. And frankly, it's incredible. And given the success of how that turned out, I'm really looking forward to that album coming out in March. I'm like, I think this is the process. This is the way. I think we found it. This is how you make music. And as opposed to the, like I said, cerebral or meticulous or concept-based stuff I've done in the past, this sort of no mind, just let it happen, has been yielding really exciting results. So I've done the same. I put a band together, largely the same band. Difference is it was Jack Ladder on bass, who's a guy that I've worked with for years and made many records under his name with. We improvised, and I've since been laying down the vocals, and it's really weird and fun. And I think, honest, maybe that's the big difference with some of my past work. I think I've sort of looked for, truth in fiction, or looked for beauty in ugliness. I think this one's actually just true and just beautiful, and really fun. I feel like I'm waffling on the absolute nonsense without having the context of hearing the songs, but I'm genuinely really excited.
Well, I mean, from the way you describe it, it seems like there's still a lot left to the imagination, but it seems like from, what you're saying, there's little to no pretense to any of it and no time to even really kind of come up with a narrative or anything like that. It sounds almost like a drift away from the glam and the synth pop and, like a lot of the very kind of tightly structured new wave type songwriting that, you've been doing as of late, and something that's a lot more freeform.
Certainly. I mean, a lot more guitar. I think I've always been a guitar player in so many different bands, from a local bands here, and then, playing with Mike Ronson was sort of the most ambitious thing that I was a part of. But with my own music, I sort of always shied away from the guitar. I'd maybe do a guitar solo here or there, but like you said, it was largely synth pop driven or industrial, or EDM even. I just want to get back to playing the guitar, and I love the idea of even doing a largely instrumental record and letting the guitar be the voice. I'm sure that'll happen. If that's not this one, that'll happen in time as well. But I'm loving playing the guitar again, and being expressive with that, and So trying to no mind, no critical thinking, inebriate that frontal lobe any way I can, and just do it and don't second guess it.
Okay.
Which hopefully will be done by the end of the year.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, it sounds like it's wild and freewheeling, and it could be pretty interesting. I'd like to talk maybe just a little bit more about the public perception of you, because I feel like I'm combating that, every single time I mention you or I come across a mention of you, at least internally, and I'm just sort of, so confused as to why there's so much, I guess, mystery and inability to comprehend like what it is exactly you're doing. But I mean, let me start with I don't know. I guess this idea that you're like a like a legitimate purveyor of toxic masculinity or something like that. And from anybody who observes what you do, even in a casual way, at least from my point of view, I mean, you don't seem to be somebody who embraces a traditional aesthetic or, I guess, ethos of masculinity at all.
Now.
So like, so where, in your opinion, where exactly does this idea come from that you're I don't know, this man's man, this toxic type of machismo type guy? I mean, maybe the sort of, they see the Bravado album cover and don't see kind of the tongue in cheek message behind that. And maybe there's a nuance that's lost or something.
Yeah, I think frankly, you've either not done enough digging, or probably also are just a bit dumb. I've always been a very androgynous, effeminate, and fluid individual, and I think that's what actually, especially with the bands I was in in my early 20s, and that's what I think then it became quite boring for me to explore that artistically. It felt like that was played out, and what seemed interesting was thinking back to the hyper-masculine environment in high school, growing up in Australia. I must have been called faggot daily as a teenager and young man in my early 20s, especially as a cross-dressing, gender-fluid person, and not that I've ever seen myself as a victim or at all, but not by any stretch of the imagination, but certainly subjected to that. And so on my debut studio solo album, Embracism, it was quite interesting to me to explore these masculine ideas and sort of play that character, and barking into the microphone and walking a sort of line that was both hyper-masculine and effeminate and sensitive, of which I think I do naturally.
Yeah, I mean, the title track on that record alone is like, a take on just male on male violence, and the way that sort of like plays into the male narrative, which I think for the time that you put that record out was a pretty radical thing to say. And yet for some reason in 2020, we're shitting ourselves over Harry Styles wearing a dress,
Yeah, it is bizarre to me. My friend actually wrote to me and mentioned the Harry Styles thing. And so I wonder how the people who criticize you will reflect upon that, because look, I don't know.
Well, full stop. Good for him. Do what you do.
I mean, I've always loved to dress, and I don't think it's not really a big deal. In fact, like I said, if anything, I sort of thought it was became a bit boring, and playing into the hyper-masculine role as an artist, as a storyteller, I should say, was interesting. And I guess that's maybe a key difference with musicians as opposed to writers or filmmakers. A filmmaker makes a film with hyper-violence in it, they're not going to be labeled a hyper-violent person necessarily, or they're not condoning murder if there's a murder in their film. As a songwriter, you write a song about something, it sort of seems to you're tainted with that brush, I guess. It's like it's taken on face value more commonly.
Yeah, I don't know what it is about that. I mean, it sort of seems to be an issue with music across the board, that people kind of just, like you said, take things at face value. I mean, a contemporary of yours, Alex Cameron, I think has seen similar criticisms. I think until his most recent record, where I think, in a great way, I think he made a lot of things more painfully obvious, in terms of like, this is what I'm actually trying to get across to you. Duh.
I've always liked question marks, ambiguity. You mentioned confusion earlier, and I frankly, my intention, long before I even made a solo record, when I was just sort of playing shows here in Australia, and it was sort of just a thing that I'd do because I could, with not much ambition attached to it, aside from trying to confuse people. That was the intention. In fact, I was trying to confuse myself, because I thought if I'm confused, then everyone else is going to be confused, and that's exciting. I think that's interesting. And so, with every record, and Bravado probably more so than any, I I gravitated towards the decisions, the aesthetic decisions, the conceptual decisions, the lyrical decisions that were the most confusing to me. The worst lyrics, the most ugly turns of phrase, the most horrid synth sounds, whatever was confusing and a mash of them all together excited me. And, that upset people. Rightly or wrongly, it upset people. And that's okay. I know who I am and what I represent, but frankly, no one else needs to. I'm at peace with pushing a few buttons, I guess, even if that isn't my main objective.
And you leave off on an interesting point. I mean, would you say the Provocateur label that you're often given isn't quite as deserved? Is it not as Machiavellian as it seems from the outside, or are you just kind of like casually living life, chasing after that confusion, and people are being kind of provoked as a result of it?
I love music. I love music, and I love a laugh, and nothing's funnier to me than something original and confusing. I mean, I'll go to the art gallery, and if I see something often the natural response will be to burst out into laughter. I mean, yeah, the world is a bit too serious sometimes. But no, I love music. I guess I do have musical idols that are considered Machiavellian or provocateurs. Alan Vega or Scott Walker, for sure. But look, hard to. I'm shooting from the hip and making it up as I go along, to be honest. So that's if that's Machiavellian or provocative, then cool, I guess. It's not really an issue. Otherwise, though.
Yeah, I mean, your Scott Walker mentioned there certainly makes sense in terms of chasing after that confusion. I would say, I don't know how much you follow his work, but I would say that's especially the case for like the newest Jack White record as well. The fact that he went so electronic with that album, and it really created an incredibly negative reaction from his audience, like working with so many synths and sequenced beats and weird noises that kind of go out of the bluesy garage aesthetics that he's known for. And yeah, I mean, Bravado definitely chases after a lot of interesting mashes of sound, which I think, translated to people who maybe you didn't think would originally. I mean, the way that, the Big Enough meme sort of exploded in the way that it did with so many like young kids who frankly don't really have this deep conception of what genres can't be this or do this or whatever. And, what you created there with Jimmy Barnes was just as you were kind of saying about being in the art gallery, was just something that was amazingly hilarious and bright and colorful to them, and they couldn't help but mash it up into a million different things.
I'm very proud of Big Enough. I mean, I think there's been times I've been quite embarrassed by it as well, but we set the goal of especially with the music video, we wanted 1 million views. That was a goal, and I think it's up to about 60 million now, and estimated, between all the memes and spin-offs and whatever else, to have been viewed up to 1 billion times, which, is like, that's a genuine cultural moment. And frankly, no one can take that away from us. But I do think that's interesting, especially that we've responded to with young people that didn't necessarily have the the contextual mashup. It just became something new and weird and very funny. You didn't even have to know who Jimmy Barnes was to find it hysterical, which was I guess it was very KLF inspired.
Yeah, I mean, I think the lack of knowledge for a lot of, especially Americans, like just kind of, I mean, made that, and I think a lot of artists that come out of Australia these days and connect to us over through the internet, I mean, I've been over there a few times, and I love the music scene down there, and I love the attitude, and I love the energy, and I love the sounds and the venues and really everything that you guys have going on. I know it's really localized, and I know for a lot of artists to go full time, you sort of need that international acclaim, but there's definitely something special about it. And when a young kid sees Jimmy Barnes popping up in a song like that, like they have no conception of the scene that he came from and sort of it, and even how that connects to a band like AC/DC. Most Americans don't even think AC/DC is like, most Americans think AC/DC is an American band. Like maybe from the UK, maybe, but a lot of Americans see AC/DC as an American band.
100%. Yeah, I love it. I heard this interesting thing last night, actually, that apparently the top 10 there's a list of the top 10 Shazammed songs of all time, which is quite an interesting idea because, this isn't the top 10 favorite songs of people, because it's the top 10 songs that people don't know what it is. Michael Jackson's not going to be on that list, or the Beatles aren't going to be on that list because people know who that is. And apparently 4 of the top 10 international Shazam songs are Australian, which is quite bizarre, but maybe it's because we have this sort of ecosystem that's entirely on its own, isolated down here. And I mean, I don't know the reason. I just thought it was quite fascinating.
No, it is definitely fascinating, and I see new and cool artists coming out of there all the time. I mean, TK Maidza has one of my favorite releases of the year. I think her last year was Weird Volume 2 EP is fantastic. Moving on from the Provocateur stuff, I'd like to ask you about. So, Guitar Center has filed for bankruptcy.
I know this. Yes.
So, do you feel bad now?
I'm personally responsible. Clearly,
you are personally responsible. You should take the time in this interview to just own up to that.
I take full responsibility. Obviously. I set in motion an irreversible downfall of Guitar Center. I did actually get an email from them after the album came out. They weren't happy, which I was disappointed in, because I'd sort of harbored this idea that the ultimate return to center would be them embracing the idea. After all, it was their return policy. I didn't write their return policy. I played by their rules, more or less, and made a interesting and beautiful sounding record that used all their gear. That's an adverse.
Yeah, the return policy didn't say you can't record a commercial album with the equipment while you have it
before you return. I mean, when I could say, when I returned the gear, so why do you return it? It sounds terrible. I made a record. It sounds awful. But it actually sounds great, I think. So they could have used that as a selling point. The return policy is arguably their number one selling point. So it was utilizing both that and their products, and they also stocked vinyl. So I would have loved for them to have actually stocked the record, and I could have done a tour of guitar centers around the country performing the album. That would have been the ultimate return to center, but I guess that is not to be.
A Guitar Center tour would have been incredible, and I mean, it would have been a great commercial tie-in, I think.
100%. I really thought there was potential there for something, but is it? Do you? I don't know. I just saw the bankruptcy thing yesterday, I think. Oh, hang on. Sorry, Anthony. I have my assistant has just arrived with my personal assistant has brought me my sandwich.
Excuse me, Mr. Callinan.
Thank you kindly. Thank you. This is my assistant, Brenny here, everybody. This is Anthony. Thank you, mate. Apologies. Look at this. Fantastic.
Oh my God. All right. So, talking a little bit more about, Return to Center, because it is your last full length LP, and I reviewed it, but I didn't get a chance to talk to you about it. Would you be able to go a little bit into the process behind that album of using cover songs to, in a way that was very obvious to me, really tell like your own personal story? Because while they were all covers and they were all songs written by other people, still at the end of the day, it felt like a Kirin album. Like those songs felt like they were your songs, or at least, you embodied them in a way where, they were reflecting parts of your personality, or, your artistic personality.
Yeah, I mean, that was central to the idea of the record, aside from the literal going to Guitar Center, buying a bunch of gear and having the length of the return policy to make the album before getting the money back. The sort of, I guess, other core idea was that it was a self-portrait using songs that I love. And that is quite obvious to me, really. I mean, the songs that have defined my life, and like all of us, are our favorite songs, the songs we've grown up with, or the songs that have been significant in any given moment, whether you're a songwriter or not. It's like, I mean, I'm sure all songwriters would agree the songs that are most affecting to them and sentimental aren't the ones they've written. I don't sit and put on my own music and cry or dance, or I mean, my songs are significant to me, but they're not the songs that define my life like the songs I love. So yeah, that was certainly a big thing. I mean, the other thing there's a bunch of sort of lesser known songs like The Homosexual by Momus. It Takes a Muscle to Fall in Love as well. Signed Curtain as well, by Robert Wyatt. They were songs that when I heard them for the first time, I was floored and felt were so relatable. I think The Homosexual, my friend Jack Ladder sent me that, and I had it on in the car, and I just pulled over. I couldn't drive. I was like hysterically laughing and crying at the same time. It felt so personal. In fact, if anything, I feel like my version, no offense to Nick Curry, Momus, sort of is the most, how do I describe this? I mean, yeah, most like autobiographical version. It's so relevant to me. I've been taken as gay my whole life, and that was something I've reveled in. I mean, that's kind of it. It was, there was a long list of songs. There was probably 50 or so songs, and the way that I decided which ones to do was really just what I was feeling on the morning. We didn't have much time to think about it. We had 14 days between setting up the gear and then packing it down. So we just show up at 11 a.m. and there was a couple of songs like Vienna that weren't even on the short list of songs to do, that I just woke up with in my head. Kind of regret doing that one, to be honest. I wish I'd done there was a couple of others that I wish I did, but I guess I could do them still.
We're going to pop in a few questions from the audience now. You guys can feel free to throw some up in chat if any, are burning off the top of your head. One from P. Duster wants to know the new record that you're working on. I mean, you were talking earlier about, sort of getting to brass tacks with the band and doing these tracks that maybe are less meticulously assembled and everything like that. But are there, outside of the band that you usually work with, are there any featured artists or anything that you're working with, or any other collaborations outside of that bubble that are being incorporated into the new stuff?
I imagine there will be. Not yet, apart from those that are in the band. on the Genesis Owusu record that I made, I'm a featured artist on one of the songs on that record, and in a way, my album is a sister album to Kofi's album. We're recording it in the same space, largely with the same personnel, doing the same process. And so I'd like to have Genesis Owusu feature on the album. We haven't done that song yet, but I'm sure we will. Then there's a handful of other artists. I'd say I have a small but very certain list of artists internationally that I'd love to collaborate with, some of whom I know very well, others who I don't at all. I'd love to get in touch with Vitas, the Russian singer, who you guys might know from that, that video? Do you know what I'm talking about?
I don't know off the top. I don't know that video.
Kind of. That's sort of anyway. Vitas. I think that song's cool.
Wait, maybe I am aware of that. I need to, but
I think you know.
Good luck on that search. Good luck on the search.
I'd love to work with Vitas. Maybe some idols of mine. Paddy McAloon of Prefab Sprout. I'd love to work with. I think a few years ago, my French record label, record makers, got in touch with his brother, who was the bass player in Prefab Sprout, and got sort of close to working with Paddy, but they sent him my music, and I think he just flat refused. But I'd love to work with someone like that. But yeah, there will be some features. I don't think it'll be as feature heavy as Bravado. Bravado, sort of, that was a central idea again, is sort of pulling in all these friends and it being a sort of bit of a narcissistic who's who sort of thing. This is I'm only going to do it where it feels intuitively feels correct. But yeah, there will be a few. I'm going to say Genesis Owusu. I'm going to say Vitas. I'm going to say Paddy McAloon, and we'll see what happens.
Two questions from chat, James Record and Fighty15. One wants to know, what kind of sandwich are you eating? And the other one wants to know, what's one of your favorite Scott Walker records?
Okay, wonderful. I reckon this is some sort of pulled pork situation. I said I was going vegetarian this week, but I haven't done a good job. Great. Favorite Scott Walker record? Most significant for me was The Drift.
For a lot of people, yeah.
From 2006. That's how I discovered Scott. I didn't come into it through the Walker Brothers or Scott 1 through 4. I was 20 years old. My band at the time, Mercy Arms, was being courted by some record labels, and one of them was Atlantic, who the A&R guy at Atlantic gave us a bunch of burnt CDs of albums that were coming out on the label, and so I was listening through them, and they were trash, one after the other, throwing them in the bin, and then I put on The Drift and was floored, and it became very significant to me at a young age. In fact, I'd say it was, I was a guitar player in a band. I didn't sing. I wasn't very confident in my own voice, and hearing Scott Walker sing gave me the permission, I guess, to be theatrical and bombastic and absurd and violent and all these things, especially his vocal delivery on The Drift. And so from that record, I sort of went back through everything. I love Tilt. I love Climate of Hunter. What's the Walker Brothers album from the late 70s as well? That Bowie covered the title track, Night. Oh my God, I'm drawing a complete blank.
Well, either way, it's pretty interesting how you put that. I mean, it is true, but I've never heard anyone say it quite that way, that hearing a singer or hearing an artist do a certain thing or do it well or do it in a way where it's compelling to you or it speaks to you, as you said, gives you almost permission to pursue certain things or do things, yourself or in your own way. Do you feel like your music gives people permission to do anything as well?
I've
Your
been told
aesthetic,
as
your
much.
music, your anything.
It's one of the things that keeps you going as an artist is hearing from people how significant your music's been for them, and that's one of the things I get semi regularly. I guess would be that my music's inspired people to either make their own sort of weird music or flamboyant music, or just to be flamboyant and to be weird. And that's something I do. I am proud of. Yeah, absolutely. Giving people permission to be themselves.
I know you've spent quite a bit of time over here in the U.S. and in Australia as well, so I imagine you have a bit of a grip of the culture over here, at least in certain places. I know you've toured quite a bit over here, so not Ryan FFS wants to know, in your opinion, from your point of view, how is America's culture toward queerness compared to the classic Australian homophobic wife-beating piss culture I've become so accustomed to in Sydney?
I mean, I think that's a harsh way to put it here.
I don't know. It's how he puts it, and it sounds like he's living in Sydney himself.
I mean, I guess in different parts of Sydney, it's very different. Sydney historically has been a very, very queer city. We had the biggest gay and lesbian Mardi Gras in the world. It's sort of known as a bastion of queerness and homosexuality and pride. I mean, that's what the song "The Homosexual" also touches on. Was sort of so one stop past Warringah and the coughs begin was sort of saying, as you head further out into the suburbs or up the beaches or down at the Shire, I guess it becomes a bit rougher. I tend to second guess I think it's a bit too easy to say that Australia is a homophobic place or a chauvinistic place or a racist place. There are obviously elements of that. There's elements of that within every society, but just like Australia, within America as well, I mostly encounter open-hearted people that'll take anyone on face value and judge them for what they do rather than how they dress or what their sexual preference is or whatever. I mean, look, coming from a place as a straight white guy. Ultimately, no matter how many dresses I wear or whatever else, I'm still coming from a place of privilege. So, but I can also only speak from my own experience. Again, America's a massive country with huge cultural differences from state to state, town to town. But my experience with America, including the South, including the middle of the country, including from north to south, east to west, is open-hearted people that are excited and genuinely interested. I miss America a lot. It's the best of the best and the worst of the worst.
And that's kind of the thing, I feel like those types of people you are talking about, you do find them all over the country, but simultaneously we're at such an ideological breaking point right now that is almost indescribable. And I really have no idea what direction the pendulum is going to swing in at this point. It's actually kind of scary in a number of different ways. Caspa 1103 wants to know, I love the track Down to Hang. I just want to know what was your inspiration to make that particular song. And Bravado is amazing. I know that track, out of the entire record has a really freaky, almost like no wave kind of influence to it. It's a pretty abrasive song.
Yeah, I mean, lyrically, it was inspired by a long distance relationship I was in with a girl in New Zealand who I loved madly, but was, a bit freaky. in the best possible way. And so it was sort of inspired by our playful and colourful, erotic correspondence. She ended up actually doing a art show called Love Letters, where she exhibited our correspondence. I was anonymous in it, but we sort of developed this vernacular, and everything from the way that we'd lay out our sentences and play with language, as well as the eroticism of what we'd say. And the song was it was directly inspired by her and our correspondence. The sound of it, we recorded it in Montreal. I played a show with Kid Congo Powers in Montreal. Kid Congo Powers was in Nick Cave and the Bad Seeds and the Cramps. And the producer, Damien Taylor, had come to the show and we met there and we got talking afterwards and he invited me into his studio the next day. I was lucky I had a day off and so we went in and we made that song in a day. So it was a bit of an anomaly from the record because Damien didn't produce any other songs on the album. He did mix Song About Drugs, but that song was a bit of an anomaly musically. But yeah, I was definitely, like I said, played with King Congo Powers. It was musically inspired by bands like DNA, New York no wave bands. We got James Chance to play saxophone on the end because it sort of had that a bit of a no wave funk thing happening. It's quite a strange piece of music, and quite terrifying in retrospect to listen to. It's violent and depraved.
Thinking of that track and the wide array of genres and moods and sounds that you've approached across your discography so far, going back to the new record just for a little bit, because there's more than one way to improvise, would you say that the instrumentals on the track so far are turning out sort of harsh and depraved and wild and completely out of control? Or is there, something more smooth and meditative and calming about it? Where is the mood kind of going?
100%, a bit of both. I mean, jamming for 6 hours straight, you sort of go through the motions. You get excited and it can be quite high energy or ADHD, and then other times you sort of just sit back and you're just playing and you kind of forget yourself. There's some really beautiful moments. I mean, it's like I said, I'm still trawling through the hours of recording. But the cool thing is the sound is consistent. It's the same players playing the same instruments, which I've never done that before. The records in the past. That's not true. Return to Center was done that same way, albeit with specific songs as opposed to this sort of open, almost reverse engineered process of playing the music and working out the songs later. But it sounds cool. I think it's sort of probably the most tasteful, if that's a thing, sounding thing I've ever done. It sort of sounds more like the music I like as opposed to deliberately challenging my own sense of taste and stylistic leanings.
Doc Funk right now wants to know, given your travel between America and Australia and where you are currently and just your feelings on the Australian music industry and scene in general, are you still in touch with a lot of the newer artists and up and coming bands there right now? Because he's curious to know if there are any groups coming out of the punk and post-punk scene there that are grabbing your attention or making any waves or doing it for you at the moment.
Well, look, I hadn't been in Australia for any length of time for a few years until this year. Came back in late February for a show, for one of my own shows and a Mardi Gras event actually as well. And then of course the pandemic happened, and so there hasn't been shows until very recently. Shows are starting up again here, but they're largely government funded. events with established artists. I'm not sure how many. I mean, I'm sure there's probably some illegal warehouse things going on or DIY shows taking place, but it's not something I'm super clued into. That said, the band that opened for me last weekend was a band called Spectator. There's these kids, Billy and Ewan, who I met Billy through him coming to my shows, but connected with him recently, and we just have incredible belly laughs together. Is very, very creative, and so I just sort of had him play based on his personality. I knew it'd be wonderful, and of course it was incredible. It was sort of like a bit like The Garden or Devo or but a bit more sort of post-internet, even 100 Gexy sort of thing going on, but totally their own as well. Really cool.
Yeah, we have a lot of 100 Gex fans in the in the audience and in the chat usually. I mean, typically every interview I'm getting harassing messages just saying, ask them if they like 100 Gex. Ask whoever it is if they like 100 Gex. So thank you for coming out with the 100 Gex confirmation.
Actually, I worked on a song with those guys earlier this year when I was still in America, and it hasn't seen the light of day. But there's like I said, there's a vault of work, some of them collaborative, that I hope will come out over the course of the next 12 months.
Any admiration for anybody else who's floating around the hyperpop scene at the moment? I mean, I myself am a big Dorian Electra stan. I'm a huge
I love Dorian. Dorian and I did a song as well actually earlier this year. That was scheduled for release. We did the artwork and everything, and then it got canned and put on the back burner for a bit, sort of due to the political climate and everything that was going on. It didn't feel appropriate to put out this song at the time, but again, I hope that sees the light of day. I think Dorian's amazing, frankly. Really inspiring. That said, for me, with my own music, I'm really looking to move in my own direction and not for better or worse, not have much contextual, or contemporaries. Again, I guess that's playing into the confusing and exciting thing, and it probably works against me as much as it works for me. But at the end of the day, if what I do is unique, then that's something.
Yeah, and hey, that's fine. I mean, I think that's maybe in a way spiritually that's a base you've already rounded. I think maybe there's an argument to be made that like Drugs is proto hyperpop or something like that.
Yeah, totally, 100%. I mean, I think that was that's how Dorian and I got working together. Is they were a fan of Song About Drugs. I think specifically was the song that opened up my world to Dorian. But there's, I think Dorian does what they do in a far more concise, direct. It's really quite amazing how focused Dorian's work is. But there's definitely a bit of Song About Drugs in there for sure.
For sure. Turlo wants to know if Am I a Woman Yet? Is that going to be publicly available again within the year, or a couple of years, or is that just sort of like lost in time right now? Is that just sort of like just unprinted again? It's just kind of like it's dust in the wind.
I don't think I even have a copy of that. In fact, I know I don't have a copy of that. That album, I must have made 200 burnt CDs. And they all had the same track listing on the back, but all of the CDs, I'd actually put the songs in different orders on every one, so that to everyone else, every song was different. The name correlated with a different song, which I guess, like I said, I've been trying to confuse people for my whole career. But I'd love that to be available. It's not bad. It's an interesting document, if nothing else. It's not particularly listenable, I don't think, to the casual listener, but it's interesting. Yeah, I'd love for it to come out. I'll see what I can't do.
Mayrose99 wants to know, what's the story behind Seconds Flat, both the song and your project with Mac DeMarco? There's some curiosity around that.
Okay, I didn't know anyone even knew that existed.
It's the information is out there. It's leaked.
Interesting. Okay. Well, I mean, we did a little Valentine song on Valentine's Day in February that we put out as Seconds Flat. I mean, that was sort of it was an idea. It was a band name that Mike Collins, aka Drug Dealer, came up with, and then I sort of ran with Mac, and Mac and I produced some stuff for the Voids last year that came out as produced by Seconds Flat, I believe. And we wrote a bunch of songs, again, that haven't seen the light of day, that the idea was that it'd be Seconds Flat. But there's, I haven't been in LA all year, so Mac and I speak semi-regularly, but no, there's no movement there. I don't know what Seconds Flat is. I love the name, though. It gives me this like 10cc Godly and Cream thing. I do give credit to Mike Collins for coming up with that, but I stole it, Mike.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like a Dire Straits kind of quality to it. It just seems really kind of slick kind of name.
Totally, I really love it. Yeah.
All right. I'll leave things with this final question. I mean, outside of this new record that you're pulling together and working on, with the announcement of these vaccines that are hopefully going to work and change things and get things back to a place of normality or semi-normality, like what are your personal and artistic ambitions that you've been kind of hoping to jump on top of as soon as, all of this is over and we're in the clear? Like what's, I know you're working on this new music, but is there anything else that you've been like mentally and emotionally been putting off for the moment that you're able to kind of do whatever you want to do?
I mean, I still consider trying to get back to America and it's been the hard thing is missing my family. Both my mum and dad are in Seattle. My sister's up there at the moment. She normally lives in Canada. My partner is in Los Angeles. My friendship circle, my collaborators like Mac and others are in Los Angeles too. And I've had to sort of build a life again back here. I've lucked out because shows are happening here. COVID's not nearly as big a problem as it is in America and elsewhere. So I mean, who knows? I'm really just looking to make a beautiful record, keep playing, honor my ambition, which I haven't always done, and make it up as I go along. I'm trying to do a bit more film stuff as well, which I've sort of dabbled in a little bit here and there. Both with writing and acting. So yeah, just gonna keep on keeping on.
Well, thank you for coming through and doing the interview and being an open book, being a great conversationalist, being a great guest. We love you and appreciate you over here. Thanks, man.
I appreciate it very much, Anthony. Thank you for having me, and thank you to everyone that was mildly interested and had questions and tuned in.
All right. You have a good one, man.